So it doesn't say God's judgment will come. But prior to the second coming of Christ, it says the hour of God's judgment has come. So friend, the clock has struck the hour. This world has entered into a significant time just before the coming of Jesus. Now, what else does the Bible say about Revelation's final judgment? The prophecies of the books of Daniel and Revelation blend to share incredible details regarding the timeline of history. They reveal events relating to Jesus' arrival the first time and what will happen before his second coming. Both books provide us vital information about the final judgment. And two very good questions are: is the theme of the final judgment in the Bible? Is it for our good to study this? Friend, if it's in the Bible, I believe it. If it disagrees with the Bible, it is not for me. Revelation describes details about the judgment, and Daniel predicts when and where. Revelation tells us many details about the judgment's purpose and scope. It tells us that the judgment determines what reward Jesus gives every individual at his second coming. And Revelation 22 verse 12 reads, "My reward is with me to give to everyone according to his work." So the Master clarified this point for his own disciples as recorded in Matthew 16 verse 27. "For the Son of Man will come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he will reward each according to his works." Revelation 20 verse 12 reads, "And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before God, and books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged according to their works by the things which were written in the books." Now here is something the Bible calls books. And those books are open before the whole universe. Now from those books, God decides the reward he gives to every man at the second coming of Christ. Everyone will be judged depending on whether they have confessed their sins and allowed the righteousness of Christ to be counted to their record, or if they rebelled against God and refused Jesus' offer of atonement. To those who refused, their entire record of sins stand against them. Now, friend, please listen very carefully to these words. The judgment is not just about looking at what men and women have done. The text said it is the hour of his judgment. In other words, God's judgment. Yes, my friend, God is also being judged during this time. Many millennia ago, in heaven, the angels led by Lucifer rebelled against God. God had given these angels the power of choice. They challenged the authority and government of God. And Lucifer said, God is unfair, God is unjust, God is a vindictive tyrant, he is a wrathful judge. And the rebellion in heaven introduced a question into the universe about God's character, his fairness and his integrity. In other words, friend, this judgment that Revelation describes is not because God does not know who is saved or lost. God is so fair and just. He opens the records of human lives before the whole universe, so that all can see that everybody who is lost because of their own choices made. They are not lost because God made an arbitrary choice to save some and destroy others. The major theme of the book of Revelation is a conflict between Christ and Satan, between good and evil. And the final judgment resolves this conflict. It reveals the truth. And Satan is then exposed as a liar, because God reveals in the judgment that he has done everything he can to save, and Satan has done everything he can to destroy. Anybody that is lost, is lost not because God pointed his finger and said, "You lost." They're lost because of their own decisions and their own choices. They are lost because they rejected his grace. Revelation reveals many details of God's work of judgment. But we ask the question, where does this judgment take place? Does it take place on earth, in an earthly courtroom, or does it occur in heaven itself? Now the book of Revelation describes vivid scenes of the hour of God's judgment. But to discover where and when the judgment begins, we must look at the prophetic book of Daniel. Daniel unlocks many mysteries within Revelation. Daniel was written approximately 530 years before Christ, and Revelation was written approximately 90 years after Christ. This is 620 years apart. But to me, these two books go hand in hand. God intended for us to study these two books together. And in that marvelous 7th chapter of Daniel, the prophet describes looking up into heaven in vision. And Daniel writes these incredible words in chapter 7, verses 9 and 10. "I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. 1,000 thousands ministered to him, 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened." Now who are these 10,000 times 10,000 beings?